Welcome to Love and Lattes, the podcast designed for women who are ready to stop settling and start living a life full of authentic love, confidence, and real connection. I'm your host, Victoria, the self-love scientist, speaker, and coach, and I'm here to help you reclaim your power, deepen your relationships, and fall unapologetically in love with yourself. So grab your tea, your latte, or your favorite beverage, and let's get started. What does it really take for men to become better lovers and partners? And how can we, as the partner, be a part of that process? Is it possible that men can actually embrace their desires and communicate openly, safely, and welcomingly in relationships without shame? Well, my loves, in today's episode of Love and Lattes, I'm here with Gareth Pickering, a man's relationship and sex coach who envisions a world where humans recognize their relationships and sexuality as true pathways to awakening. Gareth helps men embrace their desires, speak their truth, grow in love and intimacy. And we're about to dive in on how that really happens in our relationships. Welcome, Gareth.
Victoria, so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Me too. I'm so stoked. We were just talking earlier about how, the Love and Lattes podcast has an amazing array of speakers. And then when I do have the chance to speak with a man, I'm like, here we go. This is going to be a great conversation.
Awesome.
So, Gareth, I want to start the conversation off with what seems to be getting in the way of men from expressing their desires, and how is that shifting relationships?
Wow. Just go straight into the big stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the question is multi-layered. I think from the research that I've done and where I've been over the last few years in my own study and exploration, I think masculinity has had a bad reputation. And I think some of that has filtered down into men, assuming that, if masculinity is broken or somehow toxic or unhealthy, that means that they're somehow, not able to show up fully in their connections. And so I think some men feel a little anxious. They feel a little anxious in dating and initiating. And in a lot of ways, that for me is the masculine. The masculine part of all of us is the part that wants to go forward and to initiate and engage. And I think what I've noticed, what tends to come into my world quite a lot, I think it's as a function of the journey that I've been on, is a man that's not completely in his power is actually quite dangerous in some ways because it feels sort of awkward. And that looks like people pleasing. That looks like not knowing what you want or knowing what you want, but not speaking it. And then sort of hoping that it will be understood by your partner. And so having understood that in my own journey and my own experience, and I can share a couple of practical examples of what this looks like for me, I think that's part of it. I think from what I understand, the feminine, not just women, the feminine feels safe to be able to flow and move if the masculine is super strong and solid. And I use this analogy that the masculine is like the riverbank. It needs to be strong and solid and anchored so that the feminine can flow easily through like the riverbank. But if the riverbank is wobbly, then the feminine doesn't feel safe. And then, yeah, that's when relationships start to explode or they start to leak energy for the sake of the analogy. And for that, I think it's for a man to really step into his power, which is in my bio. It's like, I really think it's important for men and I think for women as well to know what we want. That means give ourselves permission to know what we want and then speak it in a way that feels calm and grounded and in truth, and then move from that place. And so I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, I think the Me Too movement has also created some challenges for men. I think men feel scared and anxious, especially well-intentioned men who don't want to be perceived to be creepy or a predator or anything like that, so they sometimes freeze a little bit. And unfortunately, how I started this is that's actually more awkward. If you don't feel like you're in your power and you don't feel like you're confident, you sort of half go. And in life, it's like when you cross the street, you either go or you don't go. But if you half go, that's when accidents happen and when it starts to get messy. And I think this is what healthy masculinity looks like. It's not to be scared of power. It's to recognize that you access your power, but you also maintain presence and keep your heart open. And when you do that, whether it's in an that says, this is what I think we should do. Doesn't mean that that's what we're going to do, but it's a very different thing to saying, I don't mind. What do you feel like doing? The energy of those two single statements is quite different. And I think, yeah, to just touch some of the layers of what I think some of the challenges are in the work that I'm doing is a healthy expression of mature masculinity is one element. So I'll put a pin in that. And at the same time, I'll touch that this masculine and feminine energy doesn't mean boys and girls or men and women. As a man, I have both masculine and feminine energies inside myself, and so do you. And the world that we live in is very overly catered and dominated by masculine energy. And that looks like in the world, you may live in a female body, but you get rewarded and paid well and achievement and recognized when you show up in your work and you strive and you do. That tends to be more of the masculine energy where, slowing down, taking a breath, self-care, not doing, surrender, all of those qualities which are more feminine, we don't really have much space for that in our world. So I think the healthy version of a complete human being is one who recognizes we have both masculine and feminine energy. We honor them both the same, and they both have an equal part to play in our world. So the healthy integration of my masculine and my feminine in me is a more healthy expression of that. In the past, I've been focused very strongly on my masculine because the world taught me that, because I was born into a male body, and because my world showed me that. My work in this lifetime is to be recognizing, okay, I can be vulnerable. I can speak from the heart. I can show my emotions. I can slow down. I can rest. I can manifest by magnetizing in or receiving, not just by doing. And so I think the healthy polarity of both of these is what could is essentially the solution. And that's kind of a long way to answer your question, but yeah, hopefully something lands there.
No, definitely. I think it's important to recognize, like you said, the masculine and feminine is in both. And when we do have that ability to find the healthy balance that works well for us, like even I myself, like when I have the ability to, to be in my feminine, to be soft, to slow, to nurture, to love, it's wonderful to surrender. And then when it's time to be the masculine, I have that ability to lead that way. Like I have control of my schedules to work, to make the money, to show up, be the leader, etc., as it goes for everyone else. So when we
Mm.
have that ability to be like, actually, I can be both. And, there is this interesting like dialect and balance between the two. So I love that you brought up the power part, though. I think especially for the men coming into this world feeling like they have to be like the alpha and it has to be on top. And I think that's also a lot of pressure without giving themselves the opportunity to get to know who they are. So,
It, yeah, I think it's just, I touched that. I think, it comes down to recognizing that, the work that I do, I don't know if you're familiar with parts work, where you look at the version of us that has got multiple different voices that exist inside ourselves. We all have like a wounded child part, and we all have a saboteur, the one who wants to sabotage what we're doing. And we have a joker and a trickster, and we have the masculine, which might be like a king energy and a queen energy. And so we have all of these parts. And so, yeah, recognizing if you just go through the world with one tool, you really only have one energy to bring. That's like the strong masculine. But you might be in an environment where the seductress, the healthy expression of the seductress, is useful. You might be in a board meeting. You're like, okay, this is a time to turn on the charm and to weave this meeting together in a way that I know how to do from this particular part. That part maybe tends to be more feminine. And there's mature and immature expressions of all of these parts. So yeah, I think what you're talking about there is like recognizing we're multifaceted beings, and the more of these energies that we can embody within ourselves and accept within ourselves, the more whole that we are. So
mhm.
where you can accept the version of yourself that is all of the inverted commas bad parts, the the seducer can have a shadow side as well. There can be a predator, there can be a perpetrator. There's all of these shadow parts as well. But if you don't recognize them, you're not very integrated, because these energies do exist and you sort of put them to the side. And if you don't integrate those parts, that's when they go into the shadow, and that's where they actually become unhealthy. But to recognize that we have all of these parts, I think, is really gives us the opportunity to recognize the gold and the shadow of these parts, and to realize that they all have a space, and to be able to move through life deciding which is the right character to use right now and which energy do I want to embody for the task at hand. That's the mastery of understanding energy as I understand it. Because at different times, you might need to be in your mothering energy to be with your child. 5 minutes later, you might need to be in the strict father holding, healthy boundaries for the same child. It's just depending on what life is calling from you, which energy to show up with.
We'll be back after a quick break.
I've been thinking a lot about patterns lately, especially the ones that show up in our relationships. For a long time, mine looked like overgiving, people pleasing, and convincing myself that if I shrink myself down just a little bit smaller, I would be enough. But knowing a pattern and actually breaking it are two very different things. And trying to untangle that alone can feel overwhelming. That's where therapy can help. Having outside support can help you recognize your patterns without judgment and make choices that actually support you. And that's why I'm grateful for today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp makes therapy more accessible by connecting you with a licensed therapist online so you can get the right support in a way that fits your life and your schedule. Love and Latte listeners can get 10% off their first month of therapy by going to betterhelp.com/love and lattes or by clicking the link in today's episode description. Breaking cycles isn't about fixing yourself. It's about learning to love yourself differently. Amazing. I love that. And when we start to cultivate this balance between the energies, how will this show up in our relationships, especially the most intimate ones?
So I believe that my most important relationship that I have is the relationship I have with myself.
Mhm.
My soulmate is the only relationship that's going to be with me my entire life. And that's the relationship that I have with my soul, the version of me that came into this body and will be with me through my whole life. I will have parents that'll come and go. I'll have family members and friends and lovers and husbands and wives and whoever comes into my life, they will come and go. But from the moment I came into this matrix till the moment I leave, there's really only one relationship that's with me the entire time. And that's the relationship I cultivate with myself. And so the answer to the question is how does this support a healthy relationship? I think all of our external relationships mirror the relationship that I have with myself. Meaning, I use this analogy. Let's go back to just the simplicity of the masculine and feminine and think about it as king and queen. How healthy is my inner marriage? How healthy is the relationship between these two parts in me? How healthy is my opportunity to have both of them have a seat at the table? So what you were talking about, today, half my day, I'm being a leader, I'm showing up, I'm getting shit done, I'm leading. The other half of the day, I'm actually arranging flowers, packing my bag, cooking, stuff that would maybe tend to be more feminine. That makes me a more whole version of myself and a healthy marriage internally. The more healthy this internal relationship is that I have inside myself, the more access I have to a full, expanded version of myself. And then I believe that I would manifest somebody that has an equal frequency in their being, who also has this level of healthy integration. So the answer to the question of how does it affect the external relationship I want to cultivate in my life, be the relationship that you want to cultivate in your life. Because as soon as you start to be the relationship you want to manifest, your frequency changes to that. You start to vibrate in that way, and then you magnetize in that type of relationship. So I think the more work that I do on myself, welcoming in all of these parts, welcoming the parts of myself that I don't love, giving everybody a seat at the table, leaning in to give my feminine some space, the more healthy this inner marriage is. And then I start to manifest partners that are also more chill, more in their own flow, more discerning of, how to integrate their own masculine and feminine energy. So I think that's how I look at relationships, and that's how I coach the men inside my containers, is like, you'll manifest somebody that's vibrating at the same frequency as you. And so if you're super, well, this person was like a narcissist and you've got that frequency in your field, you've got to expect that something of a similar sort of frequency will show up. That's what happens. If you're
Mm.
super calm, in love with yourself, not attached to what happens, you'll be vibrating with a very different frequency, and that'll flow up into your life in the form of relationship, business partners, friends, and romantic relationships. And somebody with the same frequency will show up. So I think the answer from how I understand it is like the only work we need to do is the work that we do in our own hearts, and then watch how the world reflects that back to you.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. Like you had me at the soulmate part. I don't believe I've ever that version before. I accept. And
Uh-huh.
I do think it's so important. Like what you said is absolutely true. It's magnetic and it is something even I myself noticed when you recognize like whether you're dating like a certain amount like type of person or you're like I seem to be only attracting this and you give yourself the space to learn and love who you are and walk about the universe with that energy, it everything changes in your favor and you start attracting, whether it is partners or new friends, new opportunities, just by that frequency shift because you're doing the work and learning, to be the lover. I love that you said, be in the relationship that you want with yourself. Like that,
Exactly.
that's it. That's the rule of the dating.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah.
did it, everybody. Uh,
Yeah. I can touch
um,
something else if we want to dive a little deep into this topic. When it comes to, so people get that. They'll be like, and maybe you've had conversations like this on your show before where people will say something like, you're not manifesting a partner to complete yourself. You're complete and whole just the way you are. And if at any point I'm looking for my partner to show up to complete me, it's actually quite unhealthy because that assumes that I'm somehow not complete. And I'm very curious and actually quite strict with myself and with my clients about the words that we use. So where sometimes people say it, I don't think they realize they're doing it, but they'll say, "Oh, my other half." My other half means I'm only half a person and I need somebody else to complete the other half to complete me. I think that's bullshit. You're whole the way you are, and you want to attract another whole person. You don't want two half people that are sort of limping together. You want to come from a place of fullness, complete love, complete self respect, complete integration, and manifest somebody the same way. Not like I've got anxious attachment style and I need somebody to be there to make my anxiety go away because as soon as they don't answer the phone, I'm suddenly anxious again and I sabotage that relationship again and again and again and can't see what it is. That's coming back to this place of wholeness. So people seem to get that. I take it a layer deeper and it's like when it comes to sexuality, I believe we should become our own best lovers. And what that means to me is like my intimate practice is really much like I have a self love practice. I also have a self pleasure practice. And for men and for women, it actually doesn't matter what body you live in. This is a practice of becoming your own best lover by developing a deeper relationship with your body and your pleasure, free from any other external distractions. So that means free from pornography. That means free from fantasy. That means even free from another person. And I encourage my men and women clients, even when you're in a committed monogamous relationship, to have a healthy self-pleasuring practice. So I am self-activated by myself as Gareth, a full sovereign being, my own best lover. And again, now I arrive at my intimate practice and my intimacy self-activated. It's not my partner's responsibility to turn me on or to bring me pleasure or to make me have an orgasm. I must be able to do that myself. And so, yeah, this is a piece that I'm so passionate about because a lot of people, and this has been true for me. I'll just share. Yeah, I've battled sex addiction for most of my life up until about 15 years ago when I started doing this work. It came from how I understand it was a suppressed feminine. I'm a man. I like girls, but I didn't create space for this healthy inner marriage that I was talking about. And so I projected my self-worth out into the women that I would connect with. But it's a shallow place that never makes me feel any better. And whenever I feel empty, I go and try again. And my work is to become back to this place. And I've noticed that when I have a healthy self-pleasuring practice, which looks like really listening to my body, touching my body however I want to, so that I understand what it is that I want, my desires, my pleasure is my responsibility, then I show up in my confidence with my partners because I know how I like to be touched. I can own my desires. I can come self-activated, and it's the responsibility of my partner to do the same. So it's like another layer of the same piece. You want to be your own complete person in relationship, and you want to be your own best lover when you come to your intimate connections.
No, this is huge. I love this. And I think it is very important. And cultivating your own pleasure practice, becoming your own lover. I feel like, would you say in these instances, as you're, even implementing these processes, like for myself, I learned, for my own pleasure practice, and I'm a huge encourager. I'm like, please spend the time to be with yourself intimately so that you can learn the capacity when that time comes to be with someone else. And I find that when you do meet someone or you're bringing in, a lover or your partner, it allows you to create this stream of communication on like how do you love to be, like how do you desire to be loved, or sparking that communication and that conversation, which I feel like in the past, and I know you said you battled addiction, and I appreciate you sharing that. I feel that it is something that is overlooked because we're just so programmed to this like boxed idea of what sex and intimacy is versus the reality of like, let's go a little bit deeper. Like instead of just going right for it, like what if we included some massage? What if we made each other laugh or light some candles? Like what can I do to create safety, which I do for myself, but I want that for my other person as well.
Mm, there's so much there. Thank you for bringing that. I mean, I think uh, lovemaking starts in the morning. Like how do I show up? How am I creating and building tension in my connection, throughout the day? Like, how when we eventually get to the time of moving into intimacy, like, are we creating a container for it? I'm not saying that there can't be like hot moments of just moving into it and just moving and flowing and letting the energy run. And, you know, intimacy is so much more than penetration. And I think for a lot of men, um, and probably for women as well, it has a lot to do with like the end, this peak experience of ejaculation at the end, or of orgasm at the end, ejaculation for men. To me, I like to think about intimacy or sex more as a dance. It's like it starts in the morning when we're going to be connecting tonight. We've got date night tonight. Cool. Start like building a bit of fun during the day, like start to, share some intimacy or say what you want to do, or just, start to think about it, start to build the power. And then when it comes to it, it's like the dance starts. The dance is not about the end of the dance. The dance is about dancing, and intimacy is the same thing. So like massage, touch, the conversation, you can have a deep, intimate conversation with someone that is so fucking juicy that, like it, you don't even need to go to penetration. So there's so many layers to intimacy, but we've been conditioned that intimacy equals penetration and then orgasm. And if we don't have that, we haven't had intimacy. And that's absolutely not true. And in a lot of ways, I think intimacy is so much more than that. And it's my responsibility to know how I want to be touched, to know that, when it comes to intimacy, that I've got the capacity to be able to make love for, an hour or however long we plan to do it, to know what that might look like. It could include touch, massage, that type of stuff. And then I also think what you touched is so important. People don't talk about it. It's like, especially in long-term relationships, there's sort of this like nudge or this thing that we do that suddenly moves us into a place where we do what we always do. And then we go 1, 2, 3, and then we end up in lovemaking, and then it's done. And it's like, okay, that can work. And, why don't we talk about it? Let's try something new. Do you have any desires? Would you like to explore something new? So the setup conversation, I think, is hugely important because it creates a safe space for us to explore and play. I'm talking now about let's say a long-term relationship. I think this is even more important in a new connection. And if you want, I'll share a framework with your audience that I think will be so useful. Things changed my life and I wish I'd learned it in school. Should I share it with you?
Oh, yes, please.
Cool. So it's called RBDSMA. RBDSMA, and maybe I'll just drop you this so you can put it in the show notes so people don't have to write it down. But imagine, I'll just use it as an example. Victoria and I go out on a date. Things are going super well, and we've decided that we're going to go back to your place, and we're at the place where connection and intimacy might be on the table. What's happened for me in the past is like, okay, maybe there's alcohol involved. We just get a bit drunk and then just see what happens and fall into bed. And, maybe there's kissing and eventually it unfolds. Maybe there's lovemaking. Are we going to use protection? We sort of make that up as we go along. It's really kind of a mess. And you can see how if there's alcohol involved and we haven't been super clear about our desires and boundaries, you could wake up tomorrow and be like, fuck, I feel like I didn't have any consent there. And I didn't know what I was thinking. So we have completely different models of reality. So the idea here is to be a grown up and to say, hey, let's go back to my house. Before we do that, can we have an adult conversation? So I check in with you. You say yes. And I say, I'd love to go through this framework called RBDSM. and it stands for R, relationship status. What is your relationship status? And I'll say, I am currently in an open relationship. I have a primary partner and she knows that I'm exploring this connection. And so, yeah, I would be open to exploring more intimately with you. What is your relationship status? You may say, I'm single and also open to exploring this. Great. So we now know what this is. Boom. We've had a grown up conversation to see where there's synergies. And then we move to the next question. The next question is D. It stands for desires. What do you want to do? I would like to go home and make love to you. You would like to go home and watch a movie and have coffee only. Cool. Now we know what's going to happen when we get home. We're not guessing. Both of us have been mature enough to own what it is that we want here. And then we say, okay, cool. I'm not so keen for coffee and that. If we're not going to make love, let's finish up here and I'll meet you for another date or whatever. Or we find a synergy based on our desires. So then when we get to the next place, B would be boundaries. Let's assume that perhaps we agreed we were going to have intimacy. And a boundary might look like maybe protection. I'd like to use a condom, for example. That would be a request. That would be a boundary that we speak about now before we get there. So then RBDS, we have a conversation about sexual health. Not a big taboo. Let's get this out in the table right now. Like, okay, we're not going to be using a condom. Like when we last tested, what's alive in your field? Who have you connected with? Like, just be grown up about this stuff rather than worrying about it afterwards. In the same conversation, we'd talk about a potential unwanted pregnancy. I would say I've had a vasectomy. That's not a thing for me. You would say what you would. So we have this part. The last one is called M. This means meaning. So we're having dinner and it's our first date. What does this mean? You might be saying, Gareth, I'm looking to explore a relationship where I can find a long-term partner. Oh, great. I'm looking for a one-night stand and I've got multiple other lovers. At least we've been grown up and we know what the meaning of this connection can be. And we can both make a clear adult decision as to what happens and where we can find yes as we go through this framework. And then the last piece is A, which just stands for aftercare. And it's like, if we go home and we connect, what is the expectation? You know, are you okay if I never speak to you again? Would you like a message every day? Are you expecting we have a Zoom call 2 days from now? Would you like to go for a walk on Saturday? Like, just own this piece. Like, just let it all be done. I know it may sound super unsexy, but fuck, it would have made my life so much easier for my entire life if I just knew how to have this conversation, because then we get home and we're like, oh my God, we know exactly what we can do. I know that you want this, this, and this. I know we're not going to do this, this, and this. We can do another couple of check-ins and there's obviously a little bit more nuance to it, but we've now got a super safe container that we know exactly what the boundaries are, how to play, and it just makes it just so much easier to connect. And that for me in itself, just as I'm sharing this, because that's really intimate. That's a deep layer of intimacy just to have a conversation like that.
No, I love this. This is so good. And everybody, please go back, rewrite, and then I'll speak into the show notes, because having this foundation, this foundational conversation, and you're right, like you're an adult and you're gonna save yourself so much, when it comes to intimacy, there's energy involved. You will deplete yourself if you don't have these conversations. And then there's disappointment, there's regrets. It's like you can save yourself so much. And it has nothing to do with altering your self-worth if it didn't work out. Or like you said, this person has these intentions and mine are completely different. You can still you at least had a wonderful dinner, a wonderful conversation. You part your ways as one. And I think if we could encourage that more often, I feel like it'll get easier with this rinse and repeat. And also I think people can see, they can take more pleasure in dating, in pursuing in relationships, and knowing that if we're going to your house or my house, there's not this awkward tension of like, are we going to be?
Is it happening? Or I know so many people do it, and it almost cycles back to the first question, which you asked is like, how do we make the relating playing field a bit easier? Well, first of all, let's be grown-ups, and then let's have a conversation framework that supports this thing like a container, so that by the time we get home, I'm not like, oh my God, I'm so keen for you. And you're like, I hope he doesn't try anything. And we have no idea what's going on. And so I'm like moving in and you're moving out and we can't have, but you could see how that could get super weird and awkward. Then I start to doubt myself because I sort of went in and you sort of pulled back. It's like, no, that makes it more difficult. And so it's like, if you think having that conversation is unsexy, try and just fucking wing it and see how awkward and unsexy it is when you don't know what you're doing. Because for me, there's a saying that says clarity is kindness. If I can be super clear with my desires and what I want, then you're a grown up and you can say the same thing back to me. And now, as you said, Now we're super clear. We know what we're going to do. You can feel safe because you've expressed your boundaries. We know what's going to happen. And we know that there's a resonance in the places where we've been able to have this conversation.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I think in my own personal experiences, especially being clear and just you like being honest with yourself, which you said at the beginning, knowing what it is you want and not just knowing, but you need to stand firm in that. Like, hey, I'm having a really great time. And also like I hear what you're saying and I love this for you. It's just not aligned with what I'm having. And sometimes you end up walking away with a different circumstance or an outcome. Maybe it's we may not have become intimate, or maybe we did, and then we become, it's a friendship or it's a partnership or it's that was really great. And they really showed these parts of me that I didn't know before. Or if you're
Mm-hmm.
exploring your sexuality and you're open to, involving different lovers, then you're like, that was really fun. And now I feel more confident asking for what I want and need, especially
Mm-hmm.
in like, being involved or the aftercare stuff, which I know a lot of folks like really would love that. But yeah, that was a phenomenal like acronym. And I want people, yes, please keep using that, guys. Have the conversation. Or if you're listening to this podcast, you're grown up.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
Yeah.
think
And this is the point, to share this stuff. So hopefully your audience can benefit from it. And I love what you said there. I'll just touch this piece. The part of all of us that thinks that receiving a no from somebody else is somehow a rejection is inherently built into us. We've been like, oh, if someone doesn't want to sleep with me, that must mean something about me. I'm like, I've started to recognize and celebrate no's as a gift. If I say, hey, this is my desire, and you say no, I'm like, oh, great. What this means is that I know that when you do say yes, I can trust your yes because you own your no. For the people
mm,
pleaser who says yes to everything and doesn't know how to say no because I'm just trying to make everybody else happy all the time, you don't know if you can trust my yes because I never say no. And so there's something really fucking powerful about standing in your no. And then I recognize that, you know what, if you said no to me, I don't want to be with somebody that is like a maybe or overrides their own boundaries to be with me. That's gross, man. Yeah. Thank you for saying no. I really appreciate that. Let's go for a walk tomorrow. I'd be up for that. How does that feel? Like that's how I think we should be engaging in our relationships. And then find somebody who does want to be intimate and meet me where I'm at, because then it's a yes for both of us. Seems
mm.
so obvious, I guess.
You're right. I think unfortunately, we end up coming up against these like people pleasing tactics, or there's that fear around rejection, and it means like, oh, well, if I don't do this, then it makes me unlovable and undesirable. When in reality, it's not. Like you are fully, you are lovable, you are desirable. It's just not with them. And you'll get a lot more respect out of sticking with, like you said, your no, your boundary. And that can be so powerful. And that's where, again, looping back to the beginning, it creates a shift in your frequency, which brings in the more of what you are looking for, the more of what's aligned with what is working for you right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Gareth, this has been such an amazing conversation. And I
Mm.
appreciate this perspective. And I really do love how you've implemented, in my mind, when people hear like how can they be a better lover, well, obviously they should know, like, no, it's actually where is the person in their energies? Is there a balance between masculine and feminine? Do they know what they want? And then it's having these
Mm.
conversations on the dates. So I think when it comes to being better lovers and supportive partners in the process, it's all about knowing who you are, loving who you are. Like you said, before you're going out there looking for love or wanting to be with someone, be the relationship with yourself to attract that down the line. So this has been such a great conversation. Is there anything else you'd love to
Mm.
leave with our listeners before we close out?
I mean, I can share something, and it's maybe supportive for this journey. A lot of us in this world, and I think you're touching something important, which is if we don't recognize the parts of us that are wounded or believe are unlovable, we will seek that in our connections. And if I'm out there in the world dating, hoping that the next person that I connect with is going to fulfill me, and when they say no, then it hits me, and I'm like, oh, I'm unlovable. I think that should be a signal. It's a light on your dashboard that something needs to shift. It's some part of you that believes that because Victoria didn't want to, be my girlfriend, that somehow it means anything about me. That means nothing about me. It means that she's clear about what she wants and it doesn't align with me. I think what has been really supportive for a lot of the men that I work with is to choose a path of conscious celibacy. And that
Mhm.
means for a while, I'm going to choose to date myself, and I'm going to choose to not connect with anybody erotically. And I'm going to just fall back in love with myself. For the next 4 months, I'm going to go on dates with myself. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to cook at home. I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to do my own self pleasure practice. I'm going to fall back in love with myself because I am lovable, and my pleasure is amazing, and it's not anybody else's responsibility. And as I start to do that, I start to cultivate this place of what we said at the beginning of like really coming from this place of fullness, which is like, I'm epic. I'm amazing. I know how to touch myself. I know how to pleasure myself. I don't need anybody else in my life. And it would be great if somebody showed up. When I'm coming from that frequency, I'm going to attract somebody that's vibrating in the same way, not somebody else who's also like needy and longing and hoping that, oh, here's Gareth, I'll connect with him and that'll complete me, because that's an unhealthy cycle. And you will attract people like that. That's the nature of how I understand manifestation and the law of attraction to work. So, yeah, just the conscious choice to choose celibacy for a while, not as a punishment, but as a gift to yourself, to fall back in love with yourself, because I don't think it's one of the three sacred paths of relating, but we don't spend a lot of time speaking about it or teaching it to our young people. And it's a beautiful thing to do at the end of a relationship. If you've just broken up with somebody, come back to your own energy. Don't go out there immediately trying to get back on the horse or get under the next person to get over the last one. That story, like, that's not super healthy. Come back to your own energy. And if there's been any sort of like trauma or anything like that, yeah, fall back in love with yourself. Let some of that energy move so that you're coming from a super full and complete place when you do decide to start connecting again.
Oh, amazing. Gareth, thank you so much for being on Love and Lattes. I love the way you ended that. And I do think it's important for people to recognize like building a life, creating and sustaining a love for yourself outside of any other relationship is very important. It's very healthy and it's exactly what we need. So thank you again for being on the podcast.
Beautiful. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And yeah, really an honor to spend this time with you today.
Amazing. And everybody, thank you so much for tuning into an amazing, powerful conversation today with Gareth and I, and we'll see you in the next episode.